Obviously, we have a lot of sailors in the company that knows about sailing, so can decipher the feedback. One, we sail. Two, we listen carefully to our customers. Man has 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we use it
in that proportion.
That's very important to listen to our customers and filter the right feedbacks to make the right fabrics.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari Santiago. I'm really excited for this week's guest of the Made in America podcast, Ken Madsen, president of Dimension-Polyant, a really interesting sailcloth manufacturer right here in Putnam, Connecticut. Ken, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, Ken. So we start off with the same 2 questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Well, we make sailcloths, yacht fabrics for yacht sails of all kinds. Everything from small optimist dinghies, training boats for kids, to super yachts, from cruising to racing, everything.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Connecticut's got in New England, a long history, right, in maritime work and in sailing and boating in general. So it's really exciting for me to find out that, there is still, kind of old school maritime sail manufacturing here in Connecticut. And I'm excited to talk about the high performance materials you guys make and how it fits into the market and all that. But before we get into that, I always like to kind of start off on the personal, right? How did you get into this business? And importantly, is there a personal passion for sailing that kind of fed into your passion for the business?
Oh yeah, it's very passionate. I got into sailing when I was a kid. My dad built me a little fishing boat that we decided to put a sail on. And 12 years old, living in Denmark, not speaking English, I went down to the library and got C.A. Marchai's 700-page book on the theory of sailing and figured out how to make a sail. And
is that right?
Went to my mother, said, "Mother, sew this sail for me out of some of the fabric we have in the basement." And so we did. We built a boat. We built our first sails ourselves.
You built the boat and the sail yourself out of stuff around the house?
Yeah.
No kidding. What was I assume it's not the high performance cloth that you guys make.
It was not.
What was it made out of?
It was made out of nylon. You would normally make a wind jacket out of in Denmark. Pretty thick stuff, but it was pretty terrible.
Did it work?
It absolutely worked, but for a year or two, and then I said to Dad, we're gonna make some improvements here. So we stepped it up and bought a boat and with proper sails on it and started to race that.
Really? So 14 years old, you started your sailing career?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And where did it go from there? So, I mean, listen, as people probably could tell, you don't have a East Hartford or a Stamford accent. So your sailing career began in Denmark, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so started to sail with my dad in Denmark. That's where I grew up and lived till I was 32, I think. So we started to sail dinghies. This is where you normally start, and eventually moved up to bigger, fancier keel boats in Denmark and sailed with some of the good guys in Denmark and learned a lot from that. And eventually moved out in the world and sailed with different people in the world.
Did you compete?
Yeah, it has always been competition, really. I haven't done too much cruising. Of course, in my young days, you cruise from one regatta to the other, so that's kind of a delivery, we call it, but that is cruising too. But it has always been about competition.
What is it about sailing and sailing competition that kind of captured your imagination and captured your interest as a young man? And obviously it's lasted your whole life, but what is it about sailing that at 12 or 14 years old really inspired you?
Well, I think my parents bought a house by the beach, and it was just being drawn to the ocean. And at first, it was about exploration. I think if I think back at it, it was about, that island 3 miles offshore from the summer house. It was about getting over to that island and then eventually get around that island. And then eventually, can we do it faster? And that leads into competition, doesn't it?
That's about right. When did you enter your first sailing competition? Do you remember?
No, that was probably around 15 years old. I remember the first one I did with my dad. It was blowing really, really hard on a little lake in Denmark, and at one of the championships. That was our first regatta, and 10 minutes before the start, you start your sequence of the racing. A real hard gust came by, and half the fleet capsized. So we were in the water when the warning gun, 10 minutes to the start, we were in the water, clicking our watches and say, okay, we are ready in 10 minutes. So get the boat up and get going. And I think we finished third in that race just because we made it around and everybody else flipped the boat and capsized. And it was pretty wild.
A little taste of early victory probably helps fuel the fire to
Exactly.
Get back in it. How far did you go in terms of racing? I know there's obviously World Cup, and you can take a sailboat racing pretty far. How far did you take it?
So I've been racing several world championships.
Oh, wow.
So I've raced with some of the best in the industry. So I typically was a crew. So pulling the strings on the boat, and ended up being the mainsail trimmer. So that's typically the one sitting with the trigger to the speed of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't trim the main right, the boat doesn't go right. So the driver doesn't get to do what he has to do. So sailed with some of the best in the world at world championship level. Unfortunately, I never won the worlds, but I came very close. I have several silver medals. So,
wow.
But
those must
not
be
too bad.
Not too bad. Listen, certainly, silver medals, nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, something to be very, very proud of. So that's pretty awesome. Have you ever sailed across the Atlantic? Any type of distance sailing?
Yeah, I did that. In fact.
Oh, you did.
And I guess I was cruising, but really a delivery. So we were sailing a boat from England to North America, and the way you do that is you sail south from England, and the telling goes that you sail south till the bottom melts, and then you turn right. and so what you actually do, you go down to the Canary Islands, and then you turn right and go across the Atlantic.
How was that?
It's a fantastic experience, and at that time, it's many years ago. It's before satellite communication and satellite navigation. Actually, it was very early days of satellite navigation. But as it turned out, our satellite navigator didn't really work. So we did it with sextant.
With what?
With a sextant. So that's celestial navigation. You shoot the angles to the stars, planets, the moon, the sun, and you calculate your position. So it's a nice experience because you are away from life on Earth. You're out there by yourself. I think we saw one freight ship when we were out there. We saw one sailboat. And that was it for 16 days.
Wow. Dude, that must be, what's it like kind of middle of the Atlantic, the middle of the night on a sailboat, so there's not any real noise besides just the water? What does that feel like?
It's something I long to do again, just to get away from cell phones and emails and just be able to sit out there. And what you do is you obviously steer a compass course to get to your destination, but it's much easier to just pick a star on the horizon and aim for the star, and then you play with the waves and you play with the wind, and you do that for 4 hours, and somebody else come up and take over, and then you go down and read a book, take it easy. That's when you do it cruising. When it's racing, it's quite different. But I haven't raced across the Atlantic yet.
Wow, that sounds really really, really special. It must have been, I bet that's a great memory. Obviously, if you want to do it again, that's really.
It's on the calendar for 22 to do it again with a friend from Denmark.
So you've already got it planned out. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've got a friend in Denmark who is paralyzed from his neck and down, and he has built a 37-foot boat that he converted into something he could steer himself with a joystick on his chin.
Wow.
And 37 feet was not big enough for him to cross the Atlantic because he can't get into the cabin, so he had to stay in the cockpit. So he has bought a 45-foot boat, and he's converting that, and that's what the plan is, to sail across the Atlantic in 22.
Oh, that's really exciting. So you long to do it again, and it's on the calendar.
I'd like to do it again.
That's great. So you started sailing with your dad. Have you tried to pass that on in your own family?
Yeah, I tried with my son. we had a ride when he was 12 years old. We bought a catamaran, a beach catamaran, Formula 18 it's called. So it's a pretty powerful catamaran with 3 sails, 42 square meters in total. So a lot of sail.
It's a lot of sail.
A lot of power.
Yeah.
A lot of speed. And we had about 6 years great sailing with him. Of course, he grows up and went off to college and fired me as his captain.
Yeah, well, kids will have a way of doing that. Those must have been some 6 great years, especially given that you started at 12 with your dad. So kind of that rhyming of history is pretty cool.
Exactly.
So how did your kind of experience, your world championship racing, clearly your passion for sailing, is that what led you to Dimension-Polyant? Like maybe how did you kind of convert into that?
Yeah, that's right. In my days as a young teenager, I worked for a sailmaker after school in Denmark, and got in contact with the materials. And as I said, I built my own sail first, and I started to do a few sails by myself. But the sailmaker in Denmark is, hey, come work for us. So I did after school. And met people in the sailcloth industry, and a few years went by, and we ran into each other again. And Dimension Sailcloth at that time was looking for help in their sales end in the Copenhagen office, and hired me for that.
And there you go. That began.
There we go.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of the history of Dimension-Polyant, and maybe to sort of educate the audience, because I don't know how many people know about the business, but maybe talk a little bit about what it looks like in terms of what's in Germany, what's here, what the role of Dimension-Polyant is in the sort of the sail industry globally, and the types of products that you guys make is fascinating.
Yeah. So the company started in 1966. Started in Germany, where Polyant Sailcloth was a part of a larger textile group that was doing umbrella fabrics and matrix printing tapes and stuff like that. And one of the employees there said, let's try to do sailcloth. Cotton was out of fashion, and polyester was coming into the market. So that's where it started as Polyant. Dimension Sailcloth started here in Connecticut out of passionate sailors. Jim Linville, Ralph Ellis started the company, and Jim was also a world-class sailor. Sailing dinghies at that time, and very skilled at it and passionate about sailcloth, and had ideas of making it better. So that's where he started Dimension Sailcloth. And eventually Dimension Sailcloth morphed into this laminating company. That was new technology in the early 80s. And Polyant in Germany was out of the textile world, so we were very good at weaving over there. So if you go down to the beach and you look out over the water, you see sailboats. 75% of the time you will see white sails out there. Those are traditional woven polyester sails, and that's what we do primarily in the German plant. We can also laminate in Germany. We do that. But the core business over there is the woven polyesters. And woven polyester used in boats all the way from kids training dinghies to up to 60 feet boats approximately, sometimes bigger as well, but we tend to go into more advanced materials when we get to big boats. Then we start using aramids, or we use carbon fiber or ultra high molecular weight polyethylenes, or combinations of those. And that you do typically by laminating the fibers together. And that's what we do primarily in Putnam.
Is the laminating. So maybe explain what the laminating is separate from woven sails, because it's like a distinction I don't even fully quite understand.
Yeah, it's the woven sailcloth, to get it stable. Sailcloth is all about getting it stable so you can maintain that shape of the sail. So low
the
stretch.
Shape being so important, because the shape is what's going to catch the wind. The wind is what's going to help you actually move, and the point of the sail is to move.
Exactly. Whether you're cruising sailing or racing sailing, it doesn't really matter. The racer, he wants to go fast, but really the cruising sailor also wants to go fast because the boat normally works better. It's more comfortable to be on. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of going 5 knots or 6 knots. It's a matter of going the potential of the boat. Mm-hmm. And you do that best by having nice sails. Mm-hmm. So when you weave materials, if we look at this tablecloth here, the listeners can't see it, but that's very sleazy material.
Very what?
And it's sleazy, so it's shifty.
Sleazy?
Yeah, so it's shifty if you move it on the diagonal.
Yep.
And what we do in sailcloth is we put coatings on or impregnations on to stiffen it up, so that we get some form stability.
But isn't there to some extent a juxtaposition there? Because at some point you want to be able to roll the sail down, you want to be able to roll it up, you want to be able to move it on certain angles. So you need some level of play, I would think.
Now we get really technical.
Yeah, listen, man.
But you're right. A sail has to come down and go up, and that takes, of course, some kind of handling it. Some sails you flake, and other sails you roll.
Okay. Flake,
so that's folding it over and kind of piling it up.
So in theory, would a hard plastic shell allow the boat to move better? Like, in other words, is there sort of performance, the stiffer the sail, the less mobile it is, the more you be able to capture wind, but the less flexible? Like, what's the interplay there between one versus the other?
In very simple terms, the stiffer the material is, the better you can hold the design shape of the sail. Mm-hmm. And the design shape is all about holding a shape like an airplane wing. Mm-hmm. An airplane lift up in the air, not because of the wind pushing it up, but because of the vacuum on top of the wing.
Correct.
And we do the same with sails. So it's actually not the wind pushing the boat. It's a vacuum you create on the backside of the sail. And the best way to create that is to have a good shape. And I think many cruising sailors underestimate that a little bit and say, well, I'm just moving from point A to point B. I don't need that fancy shape like the racing sailors. Mm-hmm. But reality is, I think it gets so much more comfortable if you're cruising and you have the right shape. So to me, it's important to have good, stable sailcloth. I'm not saying it needs to be the very hard racing sailcloth, but it needs to be a stable construction of the weave.
So if I touched a racing sail versus, say, a cruising sail, I would very immediately notice a difference in how it feels?
Yeah, you would.
And the racing sail is harder, stiffer?
The racing sail is typically harder, stiffer, and of course, if you go into the laminates, it can feel like plastic.
Like just like almost like a hard plastic feel to it?
It's always flexible because you can take it down and you can roll it or you can flake it. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a stiff plastic, but it has that structure on the surface. It can have. I mean, we have 400 different styles of sailcloth, so we have all kinds of types.
So in the laminate So when you weave, right, that's sort of taking the polyester and weaving it like you'd weave a shirt or a tablecloth or whatever. But when you take the laminate, you're building it up almost like how you would build up a plastic structure?
Yeah, some of the laminates we make, we put 7 times through the machine. Different layers that we carefully build up, putting different properties into the fabric. So low stretch is important to keep that sail shape, but also it doesn't have to tear. You know, if it hits the rigging or the sail flutters in the wind, it cannot tear. So tear resistance is important. Ultimate tensile strength is important. When you start loading up the sail, it can simply not break. So there are many properties that we're putting into the fabrics, and we do that by building up different layers.
Got it. And that's what they do here in Putnam.
That's what we do in Putnam, yes.
All right, so out in Germany, they got this woven sail company that's building it up. And here in the US, you got some passionate sailors who decided to start a business to, I assume, just, build cooler sails for their own sail ships and figured, well, maybe we can make some money on the side. How did the two kind of come together?
So in 91, the holding company that was the owner of Polyant sailcloth. Obviously, it's a small world, but we had conversations, and we thought it was good synergies to bring the two companies, the two philosophies, and the two technologies together. Many times when you do acquisitions, you run the risk of 1 + 1 is not 2. But in this case, I think it's safe to say it's 3, if not 4, simply because we complemented each other so well.
In what ways? Like, where did you see the synergies that helped to drive the 1 + 1 = something more than 2? Yeah.
Well, as you said yourself, in United States, we were very passionate about making the very best sailcloths, and in Germany, very passionate about weaving, industrial excellence, and much more from a production point of view, being excellent and getting to the markets. There's much more volume in the woven polyester, so it's kind of a different mindset as it started out. Of course, we have blended these cultures together very well now, and we have great cultures on both sides of the Atlantic.
So the idea, sort of saying, if I could shorthand this conversation, is sort of saying, hey, there was passion for the end use here in the U.S., complemented with passion for operational and production excellence and efficiency in Germany. And if you could put those two things together and have tremendous passion for the customer and the end product combined with tremendous passion for excellent execution, that's a pretty powerful combination.
I think it's pretty successful, yes.
Yeah. What's made you believe that it's been successful, or what are the metrics that you would say it's working?
Well, yeah, the sailcloth market, of course, is a pretty defined market. There's so and so many sailors in the world that use our product, but we estimate we have about half of that market in total.
Half of the global sail market.
Yeah.
It's pretty
sailcloth market. Huh?
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And who is your customer, right? I don't go and buy, if I'm a sailor, I don't call up Dimension-Polyant and put in my order. Who is your customer?
So sail makers around the world. So what we do, Ari, is we make fabric on rolls. So it's 59-inch wide and it's maybe 100 yards long, depending on the style. So we sell it to sail makers in the form of a roll of fabric. And the sail maker will design on a CAD/CAM system the right shape of a sail, cut our fabric up in small pieces, sew it together with the tread line of the material in the right direction and the shape of the curvatures you put into the sail to get that aerodynamic shape the right way. And then we'll sell that sail to the end user. That could be you.
That could be me, if only I knew how to sail. But let me ask you this question. So you're in an interesting spot, right, in business where your customer isn't the end customer, right? Your customer isn't the user.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if the user isn't satisfied with your product, then that's going to be problematic. So when that's not necessarily uncommon for all manufacturers, right? Many aren't selling to the end customer, but to the person, and it's maybe a component of a larger product or whatever, right? In your case, you want to have a great sail, but you need a great boat to go under the sail and all that stuff. So when you're thinking about innovating in the business and you're thinking about how to make it better, how do you kind of make the double connection? How do you serve your direct customer, but make sure that you're also serving the indirect customer who ultimately is going to decide if it's going to work or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we use a lot of energy on that. I mean, obviously we have a lot of sailors in the company that knows about sailing, so can decipher the feedback. One, we sail. Two, we listen carefully to our customers. Man has 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we use it
in that proportion.
That's very important to listen to our customers and filter the right feedbacks to make the right fabrics.
From when, in this case, the direct customer.
Exactly.
And so they're getting feedback, and then you're getting feedback from them.
Exactly. And then again, we are out sailing, so we also meet the end user at regattas, or some of our people, they also like to cruise, and they meet them on Cuddy Hunk in the weekend and talk about things.
So do you find that in this space, especially in the Connecticut operation, you maybe more so, do you find that a lot of people that work there are in part there because of their passion for sailing?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Is it?
Yeah.
What is you've mentioned the word technology a couple of times kind of in the conversation, and I'm just curious, where is the technology in sail creation? What technology do you embrace, and how do you think about deploying technology and making the business better?
So I think the first we do in Putnam is we look a lot at raw materials. When we are making fabrics, we can make fabrics out of polyester, laminated polyester, or all the way up to carbon. So it's very important for us to understand the technologies of available fibers. So that's the foundation for what we're doing. On top of that, of course, we have sophisticated machines to put it together. And there we're constantly after new technology to be able to do it better than we are doing today. Over the last 2 years, we have put completely new roll handling equipment into the 2 primary manufacturing lines. So roll handling for us is we put raw material in one end of the machine, and we put some other raw materials in other parts of the machine. And you have to, when you're operating with these very stiff materials like carbon fiber, for instance, you have to be very accurate. And where it used to be good enough that you had a little turning knob on your machine and you could, the operators would have a good eye for it. Well, today we control it by PLCs and specific formulations and setups of the machines.
So even in the sail business, the technology of manufacturing advances and moves forward, and using more IT technology and all that, embracing that. And how much has that changed? Well, I mean, how long have you been president of the U.S. operation of Dimension-Polyant?
Well, I've been president of the operation for 2.5 years, but I was VP of operations for 22 years. Together with my partner that retired a few years ago.
Okay.
So I've been deeply involved in the operations for a long time.
How much has it changed in the I was trying to add this all up, 24 years, I guess?
I think it has changed a lot, much more sophisticated today. Again, I keep talking about carbon fiber, but that came out in the mid-90s or so, and that changed quite a bit. Before that, we had aramids coming after polyester. So those are the milestones kind of in raw material developments. Of course, there's been many small refinements along the way, but it's just in the last maybe 10 years that we have constantly upped our production machinery to be more and more sophisticated.
And is that And I assume that you've seen a reward from doing that, right? Like let me ask it a different way. In manufacturing, it's always a challenge to buy new equipment, right? Because those are not, it's not like going to buy a new PC or a new pencil or whatever, right? These are big long-term investments. We got to make sure that we're going to see an ROI, not just in 3 or 4 months, but this is going to be a multi-year kind of commitment. So how have you thought about, especially when you were VP of operations, probably even a little bit closer to the decision on that, how were you thinking about that, and maybe share with some of the other manufacturers in Connecticut and elsewhere that are listening, how you might think about when to make those investments, and they, hopefully they can learn from that.
Well, you're very right. There's none of the machines we have you can just go out and buy. None of them exist. Of course, some of the technologies are common to other businesses. For instance, now we just started a project of finding out a new coater for coating our adhesives out. And there are manufacturers in the country or around the world that can supply such coaters. It's tricky to find the right one that can do our products because it's such a broad range that we're doing. So how do we think about it? It is long term. We have learned a lot from our German friends about manufacturing excellence. We don't buy cheap machines anymore. We buy good machines, and we buy the right machines, and we take the time to figure out which machine that is.
Talk about that a little bit. It's a common thing that I've been hearing lots and lots about, something I didn't even know, I maybe hadn't thought through. It makes sense, obviously, hearing it, but other people have talked about that. Years past, we would just go find a refurbished machine, or we would let the price of the machine often dictate the decision. Mm-hmm. Why spend a little bit more? But time and time and time again, I hear people saying, "Yep, but you know what? We stopped doing that, and it made all the difference in the world." And here you're saying the same thing. Talk through that experience. Why didn't you do that to start? Why did you flip to it? And what have you seen as a result?
Well, I think when the company started in Putnam, the mindset was very much, let's buy used pieces of equipment from the textile industry in New England that was basically moving out of the region, and cheap pieces of equipment was available. But as raw materials got more and more sophisticated, we could up the performance of sales, and of course that's a endless cycle. Mm. When you make one improvement in one area, you need more improvements in others, and that goes down to the machines as well. And I think my first experience was we had a catalytic converter for the solvent-based adhesive we're using to clean the air, and we decided to change that. And this goes more than 10 years back in time, but at that point of time, it was very. We could have chosen to go out and buy a catalytic converter again and say, okay, this is good enough. But we looked into the technologies, and we ended up buying what's called a regenerative thermal oxidizer. So I'm not going to bother you with the details, but it's a much better device for the environment. And when we looked into it, it was much more efficient in the way it was converting these solvents. And it was also profitable. So it was a win-win-win situation. And that really tricked us in Putnam to say, okay, this is the way we're going to go in the future. And of course, this is what we do in Germany too.
Yeah, find those, the triple wins. So those are amazing to find.
Exactly.
So, that's actually brings me to a really interesting, topic, maybe a sensitive one, but I think an important one, which is as sales have changed and we gone from whatever they made them in, the centuries, past. You mentioned cotton. I think at one time hemp was used for sales and all that, and we moved into more of the synthetic fibers. And you've talked about a lot of those, polyester, the one in the middle, that name I can't remember, but, carbon fibers. And we're talking about laminating, as we're saying all these things, and you've obviously now talked about even an air cleaner, a lot of you think about is what's the environmental impact of all these types of materials, right? These man-made manufactured materials. How do you think about the environmental impact, and how does Dimension-Polyant think about it?
Well, we think a lot about it, Ari. And actually, driving out here today, I was just on the final call confirming that we got our carbon offset certificates. So we are officially carbon neutral in the 2 manufacturing plants of Dimension-Polyant, the one in Germany and also the one in Connecticut. So that's something we are really proud of, and it's really important to us. You can imagine we are sailors, we are outdoor people, we love to be out in nature, we love to be out in wind, and we don't want to pollute. So we are proud of offsetting. Of course, we have some activities, and that's what we offset by buying certificates, offsetting what we do pollute. As a nature of simply having a heating device in our plant that use natural gas, that we offset. So the next phase after we have taken this first and very important step is to see, okay, how can we now reduce? Because now we have numbers on it. Now we have metrics. And we will measure ourselves and our success. And the next steps is not just to offset, but to reduce. To
reduce. Listen, what gets measured can be managed, right? And then what can be managed can be made better. So that's really impressive. And so is that what drove you guys to thinking? I mean, what got you into thinking about the environmental impact and wanting to make it better? Was it kind of being outdoors people? Because we talked earlier about the trip across the Atlantic, and such a vivid picture of just sort of sitting on a sailboat, looking and navigating from the stars. There isn't an engine on, so it's just sort of the lapping of the water, no cell phones, no noise, no other people besides the few that are on the boat with you. That's such a communion with nature, I would think. That's how it feels to me, not having been there. Is it experiences like that made you think about making environmental impact important?
Yeah, I think for sure it is. We are outdoor people, and one thing we haven't talked about, we also do a lot of fabrics that goes into other application than sailcloth, for the outdoor industry. So it's not only our sailing customers that are out enjoying the wind in their face, but it's also people hiking in the backcountry. And if I think back at it, it has always been on our mind, but it has not been in the foreground of daily activities. But the world is changing, and new generations growing up, they are focusing on it and they're pushing it. So probably 15 years ago, when we went to these outdoor trade show and promoted our backpack materials, for instance, people were saying, well, we want recycled materials. They're going to be environmentally friendly. And we struggled to find raw materials that we could use, finally found them, finally made materials. And of course, recycled is a little bit more expensive, and it still is. At that time, our products ended up being about 15% more expensive. And at that point, there was no interest. So everybody talked about it, but when it cost 15% more, there was no interest. So we ended up in a vacuum where we say, well, then we can't do anything about it. But the world has changed. In the last years, maybe 5 years or so, people are accepting that recycled, environmentally friendly, that comes with a cost, and we have to pay the cost. And that makes it possible to do it now.
That's great. And on the topic, you did sort of talk about, and maybe this is how we can connect to it, about the non-sail fabrics. And let me ask you this question, maybe it leads there or maybe it doesn't. You talked about 50% market share. That's not something a lot of people probably could say realistically. The most they could hope for is 50% of the market that exists within 1 mile of their own facility, right? Something very, very small. But to say, hey, we control 50% of the global market, when you sit down to do your strategic plan and think about growth, it's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, for sure, it's a challenge. When you have that high market share, there's and in a defined market.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Correct.
it's not that we can just say, okay, let's go to China and sell sailcloths, because in China they don't sell very much.
Sure.
So it's a defined market. Therefore, we have said, okay, how can we use our technology in other markets? And that's when we started our technical fabrics division of the company. And that I always describe as a 180-degree horizon, you know, where the sailcloth market is very defined and it's a very narrow path, if you like. The technical fabrics is a wide horizon, and we make today everything from very technical conveyor belts to light reflecting materials to drum skins,
Drum
like drum skins, marching bands, you know, American marching bands,
Sure.
as we see them at the entry of football games, for instance, college competitions, etc. Some of the drums needs very specialized materials, and we make those. So we have a very broad portfolio today of technical fabrics, where the biggest segment of it is for outdoor materials, for backpacks, pouches, also for functional fashion. So it's quite different, but it all comes back to the same technologies. You know, the core business is the same, or the core technologies.
Do you find that, you know, you got a group of passionate sailors, right? We had sort of talked about the passion of Connecticut, the precision of Germany coming together to a 1 + 1 = 3 or 4, which is like super exciting. As you expand to these other technical fabrics, do you guys find a challenge in the passion? Is there overlap between, you know, passionate sailors and marching band drum covers and outdoor packs? You know, where does that mix?
I think there's a good overlap between outdoor packs, you know, mountaineering, skiing, sailing.
Sure.
That all mixes very nicely together.
Especially in New England, right? Sail in the summer, hiking or skiing in the winter. Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love to live in this part of the world, for sure. But yes, when it comes to drum skins, for instance, I have no knowledge of it. My passion there is then to listen carefully to the customer. And believe me, we have spent hours with our customers trying to explain us the difference between this drum skin and that drum skin, and trials we have made for them and how they evaluate them. And I'm not a good musician. I cannot hear the difference, but I have to rely on the customers. And again, we got 2 years for a reason, and that passion we bring back to the production lines and develop products.
That's exciting. And do you see, are those other technical fabrics a growing part, and do you see them becoming an increasing part of Dimension-Polyant's future to continue to grow the business?
Yeah, it is for sure. Again, because of the 180-degree horizon, there are many markets to address, and some of them we are really successful in, and there will be more to come while we maintain sailcloth as our core business and our core technology.
That's great. Well, we're starting to run short on time, but I did want to, one thing that's on my note to bring up and ask you about, which you just sort of opened the door to. So I'm going to walk right into it, which is, you know, you're a bit of a man of the world. You know, your wife's from Spain. You're from Denmark. You're living in Putnam, Connecticut. You know, talk a little bit about, you know, what got you here, and you seem to really enjoy it from our earlier conversation and even what you just said. So maybe just sort of talk through your thinking about that and your journey to get to Connecticut, New England, and how you find it here.
Yeah, well, as I said, I grew up in Denmark. My wife is from Spain. She actually grew up in Africa, lived in Spain for a while, lived in Germany, lived with me in Denmark, and finally we are here. So I was asked to come to United States for actually an IT project 22 years ago for a 1-year assignment. And I think while that was on many levels difficult to move from Europe to North America, my wife and I, we said when spring came about and we saw the snow melting here, we actually said this is a very nice place to live, and it took some years to figure out this was our home. But I do remember one Christmas we were sitting in Spain and we said, well, tomorrow we are flying home. And we looked at each other and said, we're saying we're flying home. We're flying home to America. And we had always said home the other way. So yeah, we are from different parts of the world. And I really enjoy that. And I have to give credit to my wife for sticking out with me here and making this journey available to me. She has done an amazing job on that. And, so having the three different cultures, the Danish, the Spanish, the American, has brought a lot to our life, I think. And I think life is about making the best out of the compromises. And when I lived in Denmark, I thought Denmark was just the right place and the perfect place to live. But marrying a Spaniard opened up other perspectives in the world, and now living in the United States, again, another perspective. And today we realize it's about the best compromise, and this is a wonderful place to live.
Listen, I totally agree. That's beautiful. I'm gonna leave it there. I'll just only concur in saying this, that I was very blessed. Growing up, my parents had opted to use the au pair program to kind of help, take care of. They have 4 kids and all that, and we were very blessed because for about 16 years or something, because there's 10 years between me and my youngest brother, we had people coming in from Europe to stay with us for a year or 2 years. And so we were very privileged to have had a couple people from young ladies from Denmark, from Spain, from Germany. And it felt like a little bit of Europe kind of coming into our lives, a little bit of other part of the world. And then having gone to go visit them over there and just connecting with that, it is really special, I think, to put those things together. And it was really great to hear you kind of explain it as well. It brings back some memories. So having been to Denmark a couple of times, it is a beautiful, beautiful place.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to turn to rapid fire round of questions if you're ready.
All right.
Here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Definitely Red Sox.
That's what I'm talking about. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
It's Dunkin'.
All right. Staycation or exotic destination?
That's a tough one. I'm a traveling man. We're going to go somewhere.
That's it.
But that being said, very often we go home. We go home to Spain or we go home to Denmark. So it's a mixed answer, I guess.
It is a mixed answer. That's right. When you have 3 homes in exotic places, then everything's sort of a combination.
Exactly.
That's funny. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
I do drive a SUV, but I like the idea of a sports car. But no, I have to say SUV.
SUV. Do you have a favorite business book?
Yeah, Reengineering the Corporation. So it's many years since I read it last time, but it was a great book about look at things differently and think, how can I improve by re-engineering?
Wow, that's really great. Do you know who it's by any chance? I never remember either.
I don't recall.
I'm gonna look it up. And you know what? If anyone's,
it's on my good book shelf at home.
I love it. I'll tell you what. We're gonna make sure we put the book in the show notes. That's a good one. I had never heard of it, so I'll check it out. Well, listen, Ken, if you had to do something other than be the U.S. president of Dimension-Polyant, and it could be anything. Money was no object, whatever you wanted to do, anything, but it had to be something else. What would you do?
I would probably buy a boat and sail around the world.
I love it. Great answer. On brand too. What's something, Ken, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think has helped to propel you to all the success that you've had?
I think being passionate about what you're doing. I think that's also what I promote to my son. Be passionate about it. You'll be successful if you're passionate.
Absolutely love that. And what's something that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you think back and you could go back and tell young Ken, and if he'd listened to you, it'd make a real big impact on his life?
Well, you're gonna educate yourself. So that's important. And again, I think I've passed that on to my son. He is on his final year in college and lining up his master's for next year.
Education's the key. Heard that growing up all the time. Ken, thank you so much for coming on today. It has been so interesting and so much fun talking to you.
It was fun to be here. Thanks for inviting.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.